Hi, and welcome to episode 4 of the ENTJ podcast. It's really exciting to be back, and today I think this is the most important episode we've done so far. Last week, we saw that all cognitive functions are juxtaposed with their weaknesses. When you read where this all started, Carl Jung's psychological types, no matter what your cognitive functions were, he was always trying to develop them. In fact, it's actually kind of harsh to read a description of your personality. Whether you're a thinker or a feeler, he can be pretty scathing. But weaknesses, that's why we're here. This is a personality growth channel. We want to understand our weaker cognitive functions, to grow them, to develop them, and learn to respect and appreciate the personalities that are sometimes contrasted with our own personalities. Jung, in 1923, gave a lecture at a university in Switzerland where he summarized the contents of this massive 500-page book. In it, he describes the experiences of an immature, a younger, a less experienced, maybe even pure ENTJ personality type, or dominant thinking personality type. The thinking types, for instance, must necessarily repress and exclude feeling as far as possible, since nothing disturbs thinking so much as feeling. In the same way that the feeling types repress thinking, since nothing is more injurious to feeling than thinking. Repressed functions lapse into the unconscious. However, unconscious does not mean that a thinking type is not aware of his feelings. He knows his feelings very well, but denies them validity and declares that they have no influence over him. They therefore come upon him against his will, being spontaneous and autonomous, finally appropriating to themselves the validity to which his consciousness denies them. They form a sort of counter-personality, suddenly appearing and then vanishing again, fitfully. There is something almost inauthentic about it, as it contains elements that do not properly belong. The unconscious feelings of the thinking type are of a solely fantastic nature, often a grotesque contrast to the excessively rationalistic intellectualism of his conscious attitude. While the conscious thoughts are purposeful and controlled, the feelings are impulsive, uncontrolled, moody, irrational, primitive. Wow, these are the words of a true genius and visionary. I don't want to add to what Carl Jung has to say. I want to distill and describe to you as simply as I can what Carl Jung discovered almost 100 years ago. If you don't have the time to read this book, I'm going to link below a transcript from that speech that Carl Jung gave to those university students. It's really distilling, in his own words, his own personality theory and describes all of the cognitive functions. You're going to get a lot more from reading that than you ever will watching one of my videos, let's be honest. Or maybe I'm being too harsh on myself, because Jung was such an intellectual. It is sometimes hard to apply what he's saying not only to your life, but also to the modern world. I mean, he was writing a long time ago, and there have been significant developments in his theories since that time. Some are great, some are not so great. That's a video I want to talk about another time. Today, though, we're going to explore how this applies to the ENTJ in a real practical way. I'm going to use some stories, some examples from my own life. What are the weaknesses for the ENTJ? Let's build an image of the ENTJ personality. In episode 1, we talked about the top 2 cognitive functions of the ENTJ. First, extroverted thinking, which is about decision making, and second, introverted intuition, which supplies information for those decisions. Now, NI is able to supply the information for that decision-making by connecting to the subconscious, mysterious world. I used the image of a cenote in episode 2 to describe NI. Like all middle functions, NI is in contrast directly juxtaposed by our third cognitive function, extroverted sensing. It's the opposite of NI. It's about the sensory, real, practical world. The good news for the ENTJ is even though they're opposites, they're both pretty healthy. This is true of all middle functions for all personalities. Yes, we use NI, but not at the expense of SE. And yes, we use SE, but not at the expense of NI. But we also don't get to experience their full strengths. We don't get the full power of introverted intuition, like the INTJ, or the full power of extroverted sensing, like the ESTP, but we also don't get the corresponding weaknesses. You see, our primary cognitive function, extroverted thinking, is able to make such quick and effective decisions at the expense of feelings, specifically the cognitive function, introverted feeling. And the picture of the ENTJ isn't complete unless we include the weaker introverted feeling. Yes, it's so small there, it's not as developed as the other functions, but that doesn't mean it's insignificant. On the contrary, that's why it's so significant to the ENTJ. As an ENTJ, especially a younger ENTJ, I've always viewed feelings as something to be overcome. Obstacles to the correct, right, logical decision. I saw people suppressed almost by their feelings, subject to the whims of their feelings. Feelings seemed primitive. At my worst, I might have seen feelings as something that weaker individuals, less intelligent, lower IQ individuals perhaps, were forced to live by. If only they could overcome, rise above their feelings, then they could make the correct, logical, right decisions. That was what humanity needed. Less feelings, more thinking. I don't have that view anymore. And I think by embracing, especially for the ENTJ, the introverted feeling, that's where they're going to see the most growth. So let's talk about introverted feeling, the weakness of the ENTJ. You might be surprised to find out that it's also about decision making. It's what Jung describes as a judging function. While extroverted thinking is decisive, clear, maybe even aggressive, introverted feeling seems quiet, calm, even melancholic. Jung describes how on the surface, the FI personality types really don't seem like they want to change, impress, or influence anything. But dive deeper, and they possess a very subtle but extremely powerful influence on their surroundings, sometimes with a hint of superiority. Jung, who almost always highlights the negative aspects of the cognitive functions, describes introverted feeling as having a domineering influence that's difficult to define. It's sensed as sort of a stifling or oppressive feeling which holds everybody around them under their spell. Now, that seems kind of negative, but at its best, introverted feeling is like the influence of a queen over her tyrannical husband. No one can seem to control him except for her. And it's actually very hard to explain why. A great friend, a nurse, a psychologist might be able to use the associated empathy with introverted feeling to assist and help others, especially when they're in really difficult, tough, emotional situations. It's not logic, it's not thinking that helps, but it's that introverted feeling that somehow has a corrective influence. You see, an ENTJ almost wields their extroverted thinking as a weapon when they make decisions. It's quick, it's decisive, it's cutting, and it's usually very effective. But that's not how you use introverted feeling. Introverted feeling is slow, it's subtle, and it can be used to coerce people make decisions without needing a whole lot of logical, out there, clear analysis. So when we make decisions using our feelings, specifically our introverted feelings, it has disastrous consequences. And when we kind of wake up from what we've done and realize that, gee, making that emotional decision was not positive, it just serves to strengthen TE. We go, oh, I can't have that again. Feelings are bad. I need to suppress them. And the cycle continues. Extroverted thinking gets stronger, introverted feeling gets weaker and suppressed. So what can we do about this? Next week on the show, we're going to talk about how the ENTJ can develop their weakest cognitive function, introverted feeling. In fact, no matter what your personality type, we're going to talk about how you can actually develop your weakest cognitive functions, the ones that don't come naturally to you. I'm new here, and I'm only going to keep making these videos with your support. So please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below.